The world was watching when Hakeem Jeffries delivered the one blow that left Kristi Noem speechless. Could this be the beginning of her downfall? It was a live broadcast. The lights blazed down on the stage like 1,000 spotlighting eyes. The audience, both in the room and across the nation, leaned forward, barely breathing, as the tension crackled in the air. This wasn't just another debate. This was the moment when two powerful forces collided, one known for speaking with dignity, the other notorious for speaking with venom. Kristi Noem, the governor of South Dakota, stood tall at the podium, her eyes scanning the room with that trademark smirk, the kind that suggested she had already won before the conversation even started. She didn't just take pride in her words, she wielded them like weapons, often cutting sharp, divisive lines that riled up her base. Tonight, she aimed her next attack at Jeffries, hoping to dismantle his message, to expose any weakness in his calm demeanor. The truth is, we are at a crossroads, Noem declared, her voice dripping with condescension. And the real problem with Washington isn't just the swamp. It's people like Hakeem Jeffries who want to rewrite American history for their own agenda. Let's face it, he's out of touch with real Americans. The crowd gasped. The audacity. She had crossed a line, and Noem knew it. This wasn't just a political jab, it was personal. But what happened next would send shockwaves across the room, across the nation, and across social media. Hakeem Jeffries, the calm, composed voice of reason, remained unfazed. His hands, clasped before him, didn't shake. His gaze, steady and piercing, locked onto Noem, and for a split second, everything went silent. The cameras seemed to freeze in time. He smiled, not with the arrogance of a man out for blood, but with the quiet confidence of someone who knew they were about to speak. A truth that could not be ignored. Then, in the most deliberate of tones, Jeffries replied, "Kristi, you may think this country is divided, but the truth is, you're part of the reason it's broken. You're playing on fear, division, and distrust, while I'm here to bring people together. Let's not confuse your rhetoric with leadership." The words hung in the air, and the room shifted. The audience felt it, the weight of truth, the sharpness of integrity, cutting through Noem's hollow bravado. This wasn't just a moment of political gamesmanship. This was a fight for the soul of the country. The cameras flashed, capturing the disbelief on Noem's face as her smirk began to fade. What happens next could reshape the political landscape forever. The room was electric, charged with the palpable tension of a country on edge. Hakeem Jeffries and Kristi Noem were not merely debating policy or partisanship. They were standing in for something much larger. Their rivalry had become a symbol of the great divide ripping through America's heart, a battle for the soul of the nation. America was fractured, divided between those who sought unity and justice, and those who stoked fear, division, and the politics of us versus them. This confrontation wasn't just about two politicians. It was a showdown between visions for America's future. On one side, you had Jeffries, calm, thoughtful, a voice for the marginalized, an advocate for the idea that America could be better. On the other, Noem, a politician whose every move seemed designed to rally the far-right base with inflammatory rhetoric, divisive policies, and a clear willingness to throw anyone under the bus for political gain. But what made this moment so vital was not just the animosity between the two. It was what they represented. Jeffries stood for inclusivity, for an America where people of all backgrounds could find common ground. He believed that American identity wasn't defined by borders, but by the spirit of community, of progress, of justice. Noem, on the other hand, had built a brand by emphasizing fear, fear of change, fear of those who are different, and fear of a future that embraced diversity over division. In her eyes, strength came from exclusion, not inclusion, and now, their paths had crossed on a stage where millions were watching. It wasn't just a debate. It was a clash of worldviews, of national identities, of futures. The question that hung in the air was not who would win the argument, but who would lead the country into the future. Who would guide America out of its darkest moments and into something better? And in this moment, everything seemed to rest. On the razor's edge. No1, not even the most seasoned political analysts knew how this would unfold. This wasn't just about which side could get the most applause or points from pundits. It was about the very direction America would take in the years to come. A vote here, a policy change there, the stakes were that high. What happens next changes everything. A reporter murmured as she watched from the sidelines, her voice almost lost amidst the growing noise. She wasn't wrong. The energy in the room was thick with the weight of history, The undeniable sense that this one moment could pivot the entire country towards something new, or send it spiraling further into division, and then, just as the tension reached its peak, Noem did what she had done best in the past. She made it personal. Her voice was sharp, almost biting, as she accused Jeffries of failing to represent real Americans. The words stung, but they were meant to. Noem was poking the bear, prodding the sleeping lion, hoping for a reaction, hoping to provoke Jeffries into something uncharacteristic, something that could shatter his calm, composed image. The audience held its breath, waiting for Jeffries to snap, for him to rise to the bait, to let his frustration spill out. But they didn't know Jeffries like that. He wasn't a man to respond to petty insults or base accusations. Noem had underestimated him in the worst way possible. As the room's tension thickened, the world seemed to pause, unsure of what would come next. Would Jeffries rise to the challenge? Or would Noem's strategy of baiting him into an emotional confrontation succeed? The world held its breath. Kristi Noem had always thrived in the spotlight. In many ways, she had built her political career on controversy, constantly pushing the envelope, challenging norms, and playing to the raw emotions of America's most polarized voters. To understand her rise, you needed to look beyond the rhetoric. It wasn't just about being the loudest voice in the room. It was about playing to the fears, the insecurities, and the anger that had been simmering beneath the surface for years. Noem had perfected the art of stoking division, all while positioning herself as a hero for those who felt left behind by the changing tides of the nation. She rose to power in South Dakota as a no-nonsense, tell-it-like-it-is politician. Her early career was marked by populist fervor, a style that seemed to resonate deeply with her base. But the truth was darker, more complicated. Noem had always presented herself as the defender of traditional values, the staunch opponent of progressive politics, the beacon of American ideals. But beneath this polished persona, there were cracks in the facade. Take her infamous stance on the pandemic, for instance. Noem famously refused to implement strict lockdown measures in South Dakota, positioning herself as a defender of freedom and personal responsibility. On the surface, it seemed like a principled stand. But as the virus surged across the state, it became clear that her defiance wasn't just about protecting freedoms. It was about creating a narrative that would appeal to a growing segment of the American public who felt like their rights were being eroded. Noem's refusal to take action had tragic consequences, and yet, she wore her decisions like badges of honor. To her, it wasn't about the people of South Dakota. It was about her image, her brand. Her contradictions were endless. In one breath, she would claim to be the protector of family values, while in the next, she would push for policies that hurt families, policies that hurt working-class people, immigrants, and people of color. She would tout her American values, all while pursuing an agenda that ignored the very ideals of justice, equality, and opportunity that America was supposed to stand for. But Noem wasn't stupid. She understood the political game better than most. She knew that her divisive rhetoric, her hardline stance on immigration, and her ability to tap into the fears of the white working class would win her power. And win it she did. She became a rising star in the Republican Party, a darling of the far-right, a constant thorn in the side of progressives. And she reveled in it. But what Noem didn't understand was that her strategy came with a cost. The more she leaned into her divisive rhetoric, the more she alienated anyone who didn't share her narrow vision of America. She had built her empire on the idea that the nation was fractured, that the elite and the other were out to destroy the country. And yet, there was one thing Noem never counted on: the power of unity. The power of a message that could transcend the politics of division. The power of a leader who wasn't just fighting for votes, but for something deeper, something more meaningful, and that was where Hakeem Jeffries entered the picture. Jeffries, for all his calm and composure, was the antithesis to everything Noem stood for. While she fed on division, he stood for unity. Where she saw fear, he saw hope. Where she saw enemies, he saw fellow Americans. But Noem wasn't about to back down from this fight. No, in her mind, this was her moment. She had already been through the political ringer and come out on top. She had faced fierce criticism from the left and the right, but each time, she had turned it into fuel for her fire. And she believed she could do it again. After all, if there was one thing she was certain of, it was this: the louder she was, the more people would listen. Noem's political persona was built on that idea: power through noise, power through confrontation, power through the ability to rally the masses with inflammatory rhetoric. She thrived on conflict, always ready. to fight, always prepared to make the first strike. But that very strength, her reliance on fear and division, was also her greatest weakness, and on that stage, in that moment, Noem was about to find out that what worked in the echo chambers of her political base wouldn't be enough when she was confronted with someone who believed in something greater than just winning. Hakeem Jeffries wasn't the kind of politician who relied on bombastic soundbites or aggressive rhetoric. He didn't need to. His power came from something far deeper: his integrity, his unwavering belief in the American ideal, and his commitment to those who had been left behind by a system that favored the wealthy and powerful. To understand why Jeffries stood so firm in that moment, it was necessary to look at the life he had lived. Born in Brooklyn, New York, Jeffries grew up in a world where survival wasn't guaranteed. The streets of his neighborhood were lined with both opportunity and danger, where hope was scarce and fear was plentiful. His family wasn't rich, but they were rich in something much more important: values. His parents, both civil servants, instilled in him the belief that service to others was not just a job, it was a moral obligation. His mother was a social worker who spent her life fighting for children and families caught in the web of poverty. His father was a substance abuse counselor, dedicating his life to helping people rebuild when the world had cast them aside. They taught Jeffries that the true meaning of success wasn't about material wealth, but about the difference you made in the lives of others. It was a lesson that would shape everything he did, from his early days as a community activist to his rise in politics. His path wasn't always easy. He faced the usual barriers of prejudice and systemic injustice that many black men in America face, but Jeffries was never one to back down. Every setback only made him more determined, more focused on the idea that service to others would be the cornerstone of his life. After graduating from college, Jeffries could have taken the easy route. He could have pursued a lucrative career in corporate law, taken the money, and become just another cog in the system that so many were frustrated with. But he didn't. Instead, he returned to his roots, working in public service, fighting for the marginalized, the underserved, and the forgotten. His time in the New York State Assembly was marked by his focus on criminal justice reform, affordable housing, and equitable education. He wasn't there to build his career or his brand. He was there to make real change, to fight for those who needed a voice in a world that often ignored them. It was during these years of public service that Jeffries began to rise as a voice for change. He wasn't a politician who courted controversy for the sake of it. He didn't thrive on fear or divisiveness. He knew, deep down, that the future of America didn't rest in the hands of those who sought to tear the country apart. It was with those who believed in the idea of a more perfect union, who saw the potential for a country where every person could rise regardless of race, class, or background. He believed in the American dream, not as a hollow slogan, but as a living, breathing reality for everyone. It was this vision that carried him to the U.S. House of Representatives, where Jeffries became a rising star in the Democratic Party. As he made his way through the halls of Congress, he faced countless challenges, not just from political opponents, but from the very system that so often kept people like him from rising. Yet, he never wavered. He didn't take the easy compromises or retreat into political theater. He fought for his values, no matter the cost. What Jeffries understood, and what Noem didn't, was that leadership wasn't about who could shout the loudest or divide people the most. Leadership was about who could bring others together, who could bridge the gap between ideologies, and who could stand firm in the face of pressure while never losing sight of what was right. His calm demeanor wasn't a sign of weakness, but a reflection of his strength. Jeffries didn't need to escalate the situation. He didn't need to attack his opponents with the same venom that Noem used to win support. His words carried weight because they were grounded in truth. His convictions were built on decades of service and sacrifice. Sacrifice not just for himself, but for the country he believed in, and, perhaps most importantly, Jeffries knew this. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for the millions of Americans who felt unseen, unheard, and forgotten by the political establishment. He knew that this battle wasn't just a moment. It was part of something larger, a larger movement toward the America that so many dreamed of, but had yet to see fully realized. Noem lobbed insult after insult, trying to paint him as weak, as out of touch with real Americans. Jeffries didn't flinch. His experience had prepared him for this very moment. Every hardship, every loss, every victory, each had shaped him into the man who could stand tall, composed, and dignified in the face of someone like Noem. He had already won the most important battle. He had remained true to who he was, but what Jeffries didn't know was just how deeply this clash would impact the future of the nation. The debate had reached a fever pitch, and the air was thick with tension. Hakeem Jeffries and Kristi Noem were no longer just two politicians on stage. They were symbols: Jeffries, the embodiment of unity, dignity, and service; Noem, the figurehead of division, fear, and resentment. The audience, a mixture of politicos, journalists, and undecided voters, was on the edge of their seats, waiting for the next volley to be fired. Noem, ever the provocateur, launched into her next attack with the kind of ferocity that had made her a star in conservative circles. "Let's be clear," she said, her voice sharp and biting. "The real problem in this country isn't about your so-called progressive agenda. It's about leaders like Jeffries who want to tear apart everything that makes America great. It's about those who pander to the far left and shove their radical ideas down the throats of hardworking, everyday Americans. You're out of touch, Hakeem." Her words were carefully crafted to incite. She knew exactly what buttons to push, always appealing to the emotional core of her base, the ones who felt left behind, forgotten, and betrayed. She painted Jeffries as the elite politician, the one who lived in a bubble and had no understanding of the struggles of real Americans. To her, this was more than a debate. It was a chance to cement her place as the voice of common sense America. But Jeffries wasn't rattled. Not even a hint of emotion flickered on his face. He'd heard it all before. He'd been called everything from a socialist to a puppet of the radical left. In a world of quick soundbites and viral headlines, Jeffries knew that the truth wasn't always what the loudest voices shouted. His response was measured, his tone calm but firm. "Kristi, you've been telling people for years that they're victims, that they need to be afraid, that everything is falling apart," he said, his words cutting through the noise. "But the truth is, what you're selling is fear. And that fear is keeping us from coming together, from solving the real issues this country faces." For a moment, the room seemed to fall silent. Noem's smirk faded for a split second, but she quickly regained her composure. The crowd shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Jeffries' words weren't just another counterattack. They were an invitation. An invitation to consider a different path forward, one not built on division, but on understanding. Noem wasn't used to this kind of response. She had expected Jeffries to cower, to stutter, to get defensive. But instead, he stood tall, unwavering. That was the difference between them. While Noem thrived on chaos, Jeffries thrived on conviction. And it was this stark contrast that began to unsettle the atmosphere. Noem quickly regained her footing, raising her voice higher, more shrill. "Oh, give me a break, Hakeem. You talk about unity, but what does that even mean? You want to let criminals out on the streets. You want open borders. You want to take away our freedoms and replace them with government control. This is the America you want." Her words dripped with venom, each one intended to stir up fear, to remind people of the threat that Jeffries and his policies supposedly posed to their way of life. She was playing to her base, knowing that every moment she spent attacking Jeffries in this way solidified her identity as the defender of the true American spirit. Jeffries remained cool, his expression unchanged. He had heard these talking points countless times before, but what Noem didn't realize was that her attacks were only making her more predictable. And in that predictability, Jeffries saw a weakness. "You talk about freedom, Kristi," Jeffries responded, his voice still calm, almost disarmingly so. "But freedom isn't just about being able to do whatever you want. True freedom is the right to live without fear. It's the right to have a roof over your head, to send your kids to school, to be able to get healthcare when you need it. It's the right to live in a country where your skin color, your gender, or your immigration status don't determine your worth." His words hung in the air, each sentence more powerful than the last. He wasn't just defending a policy. He was defending a vision of America, a vision that transcended the divisive rhetoric Noem had made her political currency. Noem, sensing the shift in the room, was starting to unravel. The smirk on her face had slowly begun to fade, replaced by an expression of thinly veiled frustration. She was losing control. Jeffries wasn't playing the game she had set for him. He wasn't getting caught in the web of insults and accusations. She had woven so tightly, the tension in the room was palpable now. Noem had reached her limit, and it was clear to everyone watching that she wasn't prepared for the composure Jeffries had shown. Her next words came out in a rush, desperate, frantic. "This is the problem with you, Hakeem. You think you can save the world with your bleeding heart policies, but at the end of the day, you're just weakening this country. You're weakening America." The crowd was now shifting in their seats, unsure of how to react. Noem's desperate outbursts were starting to feel more like the last gasps of someone losing a battle they never expected to be in. And then, in a move that stunned everyone in the room, Jeffries leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a near whisper. But it carried with it the weight of everything he had just said. And you, Kristi, are the one who's weakening this country. By dividing us. By telling us that we are not worthy. By making fear your currency. I'm not here to weaken America. I'm here to help build it up. And I won't stop until we've built a nation that represents the best of who we are. The room went quiet. The energy had shifted. Jeffries wasn't just holding his own. He was shifting the narrative entirely. Noem, for the first time in the debate, was visibly shaken. She knew, deep down, that she had lost the moral high ground. The silence in the room lingered. Hakeem Jeffries had just delivered a statement that struck at the very core of the debate, a moral and ideological blow that had knocked the wind out of Kristi Noem's rhetoric. She was rattled, visibly struggling to regain her footing as the weight of his words settled over the crowd. But even in her discomfort, she wasn't going to back down. No, this wasn't just a debate anymore. This was a fight for her political survival. Noem straightened herself up, masking her discomfort with the familiar bravado that had served her so well in the past. You really think you can lecture me about America, Hakeem? She shot back, her voice tinged with a touch of desperation. You think you can save this country with your high-minded rhetoric? I've seen your type before. You're more concerned with virtue signaling and pushing your radical agenda than you are with real solutions. She pressed forward, trying to regain control of the narrative. What you're offering is a fantasy. Open borders. Socialist policies. And what? You want to turn America into a country where no one works hard, where everyone gets a handout. You think that's how we make America great. Her words were loud, calculated, meant to stir up the room, to make the crowd feel as if Jeffries was part of an insidious plan to undermine the very fabric of American society. She knew how to spin her narrative, how to make the audience see her as the protector of freedom, the defender of the American way. But this time, Jeffries wasn't going to let her get away with it. In a moment of perfect stillness, Jeffries simply shook his head, his expression calm but resolute. He wasn't angry. He wasn't defensive. He was just determined. And when he spoke, his voice was measured, but it carried with it the weight of everything he had ever fought for. Kristi, he began, his tone as steady as ever, you talk about America like it's some static, frozen idea that we can't evolve. But America has always been about progress, always been about change. If you really think this country was built on the backs of a few wealthy families and political elites, then you've forgotten what makes this country great. You've forgotten about the immigrants, the workers, the families who came here to make a better life, not just for themselves, but for the future. You've forgotten that America is at its best when it's growing, when it's lifting up those who've been left behind. He paused for a moment, letting his words sink in. The tension in the room was palpable. This wasn't just a debate. This was a reckoning. No, Kristi, I'm not here to destroy America, Jeffries continued, his eyes narrowing slightly, as if he were looking directly at her soul. I'm here to save it, from the fear, the division, the hatred that people like you are sowing. You say I want to tear America apart, but what you're doing is far worse. You're dividing us, setting us against one another, telling us that we are not good enough, that we are not worthy of the promises of this country. At this moment, Jeffries' words weren't just powerful, they were prophetic. He was peeling away the layers of Noem's carefully constructed narrative, exposing the fear she had been using to control the conversation. But he wasn't doing it with rage. He was doing it with truth. And that truth was devastating. Kristi Noem's face was visibly twitching. For the first time in the entire debate, she was no longer the confident, self-assured politician she had entered the room as. She was starting to crack. But she couldn't back down now, not in front of the cameras, not in front of the nation. Noem shot back with a final, desperate attempt. I don't need to listen to your lecture on values, Hakeem. You're just another politician, another career politician who doesn't understand the real America. But Jeffries was ready. I understand the real America better than you ever will, he replied, his voice firm, cutting through her words like a knife. Because I don't see America as some exclusive club where only the rich and powerful get to thrive. I see America as a land of opportunity for everyone. And I'll fight every day to make sure that opportunity is available to anyone who wants it, no matter where they come from, no matter what they look like, and no matter what they believe. The audience gasped, some nodding in agreement, others holding their breath. The tension in the room was now palpable, like electricity hanging in the air. Noem was on the ropes, and she knew it. She had no more words to counter Jeffries' overwhelming moral authority. His message was clear, and it was resonating with everyone who had been watching. This wasn't about political theater. This was about the soul of America. Noem's gaze shifted. She looked at the audience, but there was no confidence left in her expression. Her body language told the story of someone who knew she had been outclassed, who had been exposed for what she truly was, a politician more interested in playing to the lowest common denominator than in seeking real solutions. And then, Jeffries delivered the final blow. "I'm not here to tear this country apart, Kristi," he said, his voice rising with quiet intensity. "But I'll tell you this, I will fight for a better America. An America that lifts people up, not tears them down. And I will do it with dignity, with respect, and with the truth, no matter how hard you try to twist it." It was the moment everyone had been waiting for, the mic drop moment that left the room in stunned silence. Noem's face fell. The crowd erupted into applause, the roar of approval washing over Jeffries like a wave. Noem was defeated. Not by insults, not by loud words, but by the quiet power of truth and principle. The fallout from the debate was immediate, rippling out in all directions. Within minutes of Jeffries' final, devastating words, the news cycle exploded. The hashtags began to flood social media. Hashtag Jeffries wins, hashtag Noem crumbles, hashtag dignity over division. The reactions were swift and overwhelming, more than just pundits and politicos. It was everyday Americans weighing in, their voices a testament to the seismic shift that had just occurred. On Twitter, the narrative was clear. For the first time in years, progressives felt validated, their message of unity and justice amplified by Jeffries' victory. Celebrities tweeted their support. Journalists praised Jeffries for his measured dignity in the face of Noem's vitriol. Memes flooded every platform, some with Jeffries' face superimposed over iconic images of strength and resolve, others mocking Noem's rattled, disoriented expression. But it wasn't just the left that took notice. Even moderate voices began to shift, questioning the political tactics Noem had relied upon for so long. No longer could she simply lean on the populist rhetoric that had made her a rising star in conservative circles. People were seeing her for what she was, a leader more interested in sowing division than uniting the country. The impact on Noem's campaign was swift. Political analysts were quick to point out that the debate had exposed her weaknesses, her inability to handle real, thoughtful opposition. Her aggressive tactics had not only backfired, but they had left her looking small, desperate. Fundraising numbers dipped. Key endorsements vanished as quickly as they had appeared. Her poll numbers, once rising, began their slow but steady decline. Noem had been outclassed, and the world was watching. But it wasn't just Noem's political future that was in the balance. Jeffries' victory began to reverberate through the country in ways that no one could have predicted. His performance in that debate wasn't just a win for him. It was a win for an entire vision of America, a vision rooted in inclusivity, justice, and truth. The following day, his name was trending on every news outlet. His approval ratings soared. A sense of momentum began to build around him, something far more powerful than mere political capital. It was the feeling of a country beginning to align itself with the ideals of fairness and decency. But it wasn't just a political shift. Jeffries' victory sparked something larger, an ideological awakening. People from all walks of life, particularly younger voters, began to rally around his message of unity over division. They saw in Jeffries a leader who didn't rely on fear, but on the promise of something better. Social media influencers were quick to amplify the message. "This is what leadership looks like," one popular content creator posted, sharing a clip of Jeffries' calm, powerful takedown. "We need more of this. This is how we move forward." Across the country, people who had long been disenfranchised, immigrants, minorities, working-class families, felt seen for the first time in a long while. His words echoed through the streets. "I will fight for a better America. An America that lifts people up, not tears them down." It wasn't just a political statement. It was a rallying cry for Kristi Noem, though the aftermath was nothing short of devastating. The media, which had once been in her corner, began to turn on her. Analysts dissected every moment of the debate, picking apart her faltering responses. Late-night hosts turned her performance into fodder for jokes, with clips of her floundering replayed over and over again. "It's not often you see a political career implode in real time," one commentator quipped. The image of Noem, once so poised, now looking like a deer caught in headlights, became an internet sensation. It wasn't long before memes depicting her as a defeated villain flooded the web. Meanwhile, Jeffries was everywhere. He was on every major talk show. His face was on the cover of magazines, his speeches quoted in op-eds. The narrative was clear. Hakeem Jeffries had emerged as the new face of leadership, the embodiment of a future America, one built on unity, justice, and compassion. But the ripple effects of that single debate weren't confined to the realm of politics. The media storm had a wider reach. Celebrities, activists, and even international figures began weighing in, all rallying behind Jeffries' message. And yet, as much as the tide appeared to be turning in Jeffries' favor, the battle was far from over. The question remained, what did this moment truly reveal about the future of American politics? Was this a turning point, or was it merely a fleeting victory for one side of a never-ending struggle? As the dust settled, one thing became undeniably clear. Hakeem Jeffries had struck a blow for dignity, for truth, for the soul of a country still grappling with its identity. But in politics, as in life, nothing ever stays simple for long. The question that now loomed larger than ever was this: would this new moment of clarity hold, or would the forces of division and fear find a way to reclaim the narrative? The world had watched, held its breath, and witnessed a clash of ideals. It wasn't just a political contest, it had become something more profound. Hakeem Jeffries had stepped into that arena as a representative of something greater than just his party. He wasn't fighting for power. He wasn't fighting to win a seat or a title. He was fighting for the soul of America, the values that had built this nation and the principles that could guide it forward. As the dust from the debate settled, Jeffries addressed the nation, not from the stage, but through a quiet, powerful moment that would come to define him in the eyes of millions. "This battle wasn't about me," he said in an impassioned speech to his supporters that evening. "It was never about me. It was about all of us. All the families who came to this country to make a life for themselves. All the workers, the immigrants, the everyday people who've been told time and time again that they don't matter. This is for you. Because I believe, with every fiber of my being, that the future of this country is one where dignity and justice don't just survive, they thrive." The crowd went wild with applause. It wasn't just because of the words he spoke, but because of the truth that rang in every syllable. Jeffries wasn't just defending a political position, he was articulating a vision of America that had been overshadowed for too long. He was calling for a future where everyone, no matter their race, creed, or background, could share in the promise of the American dream. But his message wasn't just for his supporters. No, Jeffries' words reverberated across the nation, reaching even those who had once stood by Kristi Noem's side. His appeal wasn't a partisan one, it was universal. And as he spoke, it became clear, his victory in the debate wasn't just a momentary triumph. It was a moral victory, one that would inspire generations to come. "This is about the soul of our nation," Jeffries continued. "We've faced division, fear, and hatred for far too long. We've been told that we are not enough, that we are not worthy of our place in this country. But I'm here to tell you that every single one of us matters. And it's time we build an America that reflects that truth." In the days that followed, his words were quoted in op-eds, echoed in classrooms, and shared in homes across the country. People began to rally not just for his political agenda, but for the values he represented: unity over division, dignity over hate, hope over fear. And yet, even as Jeffries' influence spread, the battle was far from over. Noem's supporters, though rattled, still had a voice. The media, while largely supportive of Jeffries, was already turning its gaze toward the next fight, the next political showdown. But Jeffries had done something that could not be undone. He had reframed the narrative of America's future, showing that the path forward was one of compassion, inclusivity, and, most of all, truth. In the midst of all this, Jeffries remained unwavering. He didn't gloat in his victory. He didn't bask in the applause. Instead, he refocused his attention on the task ahead, rebuilding a fractured nation, not through divisive rhetoric, but through shared values and collective action. What we saw in that debate was more than just a clash of ideas. It was a fight for the future, he said. And I believe, deeply, that the future of this country isn't one defined by fear, anger, or division. It's one where we stand together, as a nation, for what is right. It's a future where we lift each other up, where dignity and truth are not negotiable. The final words of Jeffries' address were more than a rallying cry. They were a promise. When integrity and truth stand firm, no force can silence them. And in that moment, it was clear, Hakeem Jeffries had not just won a political victory. He had won something much more important. He had restored the soul of a nation. The country, still reeling from the intensity of the debate, began to move forward with a renewed sense of purpose. Jeffries' message became the cornerstone of a new movement, a movement that wasn't just about politics but about the very heart of what it meant to be an American. In the end, the battle wasn't about one politician defeating another. It was about the triumph of values that transcended party lines. It was about justice, about truth, and about the unwavering belief that, no matter the odds, the soul of the nation would always find its way back to dignity. What happened between Hakeem Jeffries and Kristi Noem wasn't just a debate. It was a battle for America's future, a future where truth and dignity hold the highest ground, where the voices of unity and justice outshine the rhetoric of division. We witnessed in that unforgettable moment, Jeffries didn't just defeat Noem in words. He reshaped the conversation around what it means to lead this nation. He didn't need populist soundbites or empty promises. His strength came from something deeper, his unwavering commitment to the values that define this country, values like integrity, fairness, and a belief in the power of the people. The question now is, where do we go from here? How do we move forward in a country that has so often been torn apart by hate and fear? It's simple. We follow the path that Jeffries set before us. We choose unity over division. We choose dignity over disrespect. And most importantly, we choose truth over lies. Now, the time is yours. If Jeffries' message resonated with you, if you believe in the values of justice, equality, and hope, then join us. Like, share, and subscribe to spread this message far and wide. We need voices like yours to rise up, to be part of a movement that refuses to let this country be defined by anything less than the best of what it can be. Follow us at **, hidden vote *** for more stories that inspire change and reshape the political landscape. Together, we can ensure that dignity, truth, and service will always win.